Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another RedGamingTech.com video with myself, Crimson Rain, and we'll be talking about the Microsoft press conference that's supposedly going to be taking place. Now, if rumour holds true, Microsoft will be having a press conference on the Xbox 720 late April the 26th to be precise, and in that press conference we're going to be hearing numerous things, including a supposed partnership with Electronic Arts, EA if you prefer. So in this video we're going to be talking a little bit about what I'm hoping to see in the press conference, what I'm hoping is announced, and just a little bit of speculation and so forth, shall I say, of the console. Now, before, of course, we talk about Microsoft, we do have to talk about Sony. It wasn't too long ago, of course, that Sony had their major announcement on the PlayStation 4, and to say that people were left impressed is an understatement. Indeed, even fans of the Xbox 360 had to admit that Sony did a very good job with their console. I think there were numerous reasons for this. One, they did cater extremely well for developers, and it's obvious from the various interviews with developers and the technical demos of the PlayStation 4 that they have done a very good job with the console, have made it easy to program for, and so on. While many people weren't exactly shocked with the innovations on the PlayStation 4, I mean, sure, it had a few nice bits here and there, such as the sharing functionality and, you know, the touchscreen, the controller. There's nothing there that really made anyone go, my goodness, this is incredible leap forward. You know, it's not like suddenly it's going to, you know, implant a microchip into our brain and we're going to be able to interact with the characters on a thought basis. But what it does do is redefine the standards of gaming in terms of the graphics and the immersion qualities, and that was very obvious from Sony. It's making it very obvious that they are focusing heavily on the gaming aspect, and indeed you can even tell that by the way they kind of sidelined the PlayStation 4i. They didn't make it to the point where, of course, they didn't mention it, but they did mention it and then they moved on. It wasn't the centerpiece of the announcement. So now, of course, it's Microsoft's turn, and I think they were quite smart actually in giving it a couple of months. They wanted to see what Sony had. It gives them a couple of months for the industry to kind of settle down, and it's not going to be immediate like-for-like comparisons. After all, if you follow up the day after or something similar, it makes it very easy. It's fresh in someone's mind. And you can say, hey, this is, you know, this wasn't as good, or they, you know, Sony did this better, or, you know, Microsoft did this better. At least if you've left it a couple of months, it does allow people to kind of judge it on its own merits, which is very important, of course, for Microsoft. So I think the first thing we're going to have to talk about is the EA partnership. Obviously, this is not confirmed yet, it's only rumour, with Microsoft. Of course, Electronic Arts have a massive variety and library of games, and while I don't think we're going to see exactly exclusives, I mean, sure, there might be one or two, or maybe delayed on the PlayStation 4. Sure, there might even be one exclusive here and there, but I doubt it. Electronic Arts really doesn't benefit that much, particularly if the PlayStation 4 ends up selling extremely well. Obviously, if the PS4 tanks, and I'm obviously not saying it will, then that's a different matter. But early on in the console's life, it really isn't smart of EA to kind of jump on one ship or the other. On the other hand, let's assume, just for a moment, let's make a few assumptions. Let's assume that Electronic Arts gets on stage on the Microsoft press conference and they say, hey, you know what, guys, we're going to allow Microsoft access to DLC a little bit earlier, or maybe even exclusive pieces of DLC, and various other bits and bobs that gamers may want. Now, EA have made it abundantly clear that they are going to be supporting the PlayStation 4 platform, and as I said, this is quite smart. However, it is worth noting that on the PlayStation 4 conference, you saw Ubisoft, you saw Capcom, among others, but you didn't really see EA. EA didn't really participate too much. So perhaps that's more of an exclusivity agreement for Microsoft. Perhaps Microsoft kind of said, hey, could you do us a favor here and, you know, not really do that, because it would be, you know, absolutely swell for our relationship. But in terms of actual content, you know, what can you expect? Well, as I said before, most likely exclusive pieces of downloadable content. Bear in mind that some pieces of DLC can be very good, and some can suck. I mean, for example, with Electronic Arts now really getting into the whole microtransaction thing, which I really dislike. I've kind of made my piece on that, so I'm not going to mention it all over again, but I don't like that. But some pieces of microtransactions aren't that exclusive, as in it wouldn't really be that amazing if Microsoft were to get those. For example, easier access to weapons if you pay a certain fee, which is pretty much what you could do with Dead Space. You know, if you really boil it down to its core elements, that's what you can do. However, let's say there was another pieces. Let's say, for example, Mass Effect 4, and obviously it's not confirmed yet. Well, we know it's being worked on, but we don't know what systems are still on. But let's assume Mass Effect 4 is going to ship on the PS4 and Xbox 720, which is likely, to be honest. Let's assume it did, and Microsoft were to say, hey, we've got this new piece of DLC which is going to add, 3 or 4 hours of solo gameplay on it. That would be quite a nice coup, quite a nice scoop, and kind of a hey, look, we've got in the face of the PlayStation owners. That's not necessarily going to sway you. I mean, let's say, for example, you're not sure which console to get. You probably won't go for Microsoft for a small piece of DLC like that, but it certainly is a nice touch. Once again, there's also the staggered release date. So, for example, you could maybe have to wait 3, 4, 6 months. I don't think it'll be that long for a game to surface on the PlayStation 4. Obviously, that's certainly not going to be all of them. For example, EA Sports franchises, which I'm not really that familiar with, I don't really play them, they're likely not to be staggered releases for obvious reasons. But other titles that, can kind of be delayed a little bit, they're possibilities. Okay, so we also know about, the date, well, supposed date, and to be honest, even if it's not this particular date, we can kind of surmise it anyway. And we know, of course, that EA are now supposedly in bed with Microsoft, not to a massive degree, of course, but regardless, what other stuff can we expect to see? Well, obviously, Sony were a bit conspicuous with the absence of the design of the PlayStation 4 in terms of the actual system itself. In other words, we have no idea what it looks like. It could be made out of a daisy-chained set of flowers for all we know, or it could be made out of solid diamonds. We just don't know at this point. Regardless, I don't think anyone really cares. I mean, sure, there's a curiosity factor, but Sony were wise to hold it back for a couple of reasons. One, it allows them to say, hey, you know what, in 3, 4, 5, 6 months time, look, we can actually show you guys the PlayStation 4, and of course there's going to be another set of hype. It leaves them some ammunition after, of course, Microsoft's conference, which is important. Sony were also very forthcoming with the specifications. Now, I've mentioned and talked to death about the PlayStation 4 and Xbox 720's specifications, supposedly. Now, if you're curious on that and you haven't checked out the videos, I suggest you, check them out. I've got numerous which compare the two specifications of the rumoured consoles. Well, should I say rumoured in terms of the Xbox 720? Obviously, PS4 has been confirmed now. Regardless, with the Xbox 720, we do know a few things. First of all, if the supposed specs, the leaked specifications are true, we're only going to be seeing 8GB of DDR3 RAM, and we're also going to be seeing an inferior graphics card to the PS4. Now, that could be a slight hindrance to Microsoft in terms of the press conference, in terms of honesty when they announce the specifications. They have to be a bit smart. If they do announce that and they say, hey, our specifications are this and this, it doesn't take long for these things to circulate on the internet, and no one really wants the thought of owning the technically inferior console. While many people agree that games, of course, are the most important thing, there's a couple of reasons you don't. First of all, it's fanboy bait all the time, and I don't really like fanboyism. I try to not come down on the side of one, console manufacturer. I just like the games, as you guys know. But the other reason is, let's say there is a game that's on both systems, and let's say, for example, the PlayStation 4 version is superior graphically. Well, if you're tied between the two consoles, in other words, you're not sure which one to go for, and you see the PlayStation 4 version of the game just looks that little bit better, why wouldn't you get it? And okay, let's say even if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford to buy it at both systems, Microsoft still get a kickback. In other words, they still get money from the version you buy. In other words, the publisher has to pay Microsoft a small fee, whatever they negotiate, of course, for the game to be distributed on that system. That's one of the reasons that console games are more expensive than PC. Not the only reason, but one of the reasons. So because of that, they obviously would prefer you to buy the Xbox 720 version. However, at the same time, they have to be somewhat honest. Let's say, for example, they were to say not announce the specifications. It won't take too long until the console's announced for the specifications of the console to be kind of figured out anyway. I mean, they were with the Wii U. And regardless, even if they not announced, even if somehow Microsoft managed to have a cast iron lid on the specifications and they use all pre-rendered footage that equals to the PlayStation 4 in the show, and obviously this isn't going to happen, I'm just saying, in a supposed world, in 6 months to 12 months after the console's release, we're going to see that, the PlayStation 4 starts to pull ahead. If assuming the graphics system and the memory is better, which is of course supposed at the moment, it's by no means confirmed. What we can definitely, of course, expect to see from Microsoft is their usual, way of wooing the crowd. Now, this is probably going to be done over numerous reasons. First of all, they have to announce some exclusive games. What about Halo? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Halo's there, although I'm not necessarily expecting Halo. After all, Halo was recently released on the Xbox 360 anyway. It's possible it could be a new Forza, it could be numerous games. There were rumblings of Alan Wake being made, another Alan Wake, that'd be Alan Wake 2 of course, not American Nightmares. But regardless of the fact, even if that's true, there needs to be a couple of games that people actually really want to play. Now obviously there could be an entirely new franchise launched on the Xbox 720. There doesn't necessarily have to be rehashes. And I use rehash in a very nice way, not in a harsh way, of Xbox 360 games. In other words, they could make a new game called Tumbling, just for example, and it's an absolutely fantastic, let's say, Wipeout type of game. I'm obviously just completely making this up off the top of my head. It's absolutely fantastic, and people say, hey, you know what, this isn't actually too bad. And then, of course, when it's reviewed, yeah, people actually quite like it, and it's a nice game. Obviously, once exactly as I said in the PlayStation 4 kind of aftermath, when I did an analysis of the press event of the PS4, I said the launch games are one of the most important times. Later on, say 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, in other words, a couple of years afterwards, of course, you've still got to have excellent games. But as it turns out, the first couple of months on a console launch, they really do make a major difference. There's a couple of reasons for this. They're fairly obvious, but I'll just quickly go through them anyway. The first is, well, why would you buy a console if the games on it initially suck? Okay, admittedly, you might buy it if it has some really nice features, or you might just buy it because you're a tech head, and hey, why not? The other thing is, let's say you have a friend, Tom. I don't know why I keep using the word name Tom, but regardless. And let's say Tom comes around your house and he sees the Xbox 720 and he's playing on, let's go with Tumbling again, I don't know why, but regardless, let's say he's playing and he says, wow, this actually game is pretty cool. And he sees your other games and, he sees Forza, 18 on there as well. And he thinks, wow, this is actually pretty nice. Okay, I'm going to have to buy an Xbox 720. In other words, the games were enough to convince others who have used the game, and of course also it spreads like wildfire around the internet. You need something to really catch them, and I think this is all fairly obvious, and I don't really think it bears me explaining too much of that any deeper to you guys. Most of the viewers I seem to have regularly understand most of the stuff anyway, but I'll just repeat it anywho. So regardless of the fact, now we know that Xbox of course needs some killer games, and I have no doubt that Microsoft are going to have those on launch. Xbox 360 had them. The original Xbox had a pretty decent library as well. Indeed, to be honest with you, Xbox One, the original Xbox, had a pretty killer library. There were a couple of games on it I really wanted. Halo, of course, being one of them. I remember when I was fairly young and I saw Halo being demoed on television, actually, well before the PlayStation 2 was officially rumoured and announced, and I bought it. I thought, wow, this actually game looks pretty cool. I actually wouldn't mind that. And eventually, of course, I did buy the Xbox One and Xbox 360 and so forth. Now, I'm also hoping we're going to get Microsoft to either confirm or debunk the whole can the Xbox 720 play second-hand games malarkey. Now, obviously, some people are very against second-hand games in terms of, they feel it screws over the publisher's rights and so on. I'll just quickly give my opinion on it. It may not be popular. I actually don't mind the fact that the publishers don't get all the money. In most cases, obviously if it's a small indie developer, then I prefer them to get the cash, but generally speaking, it doesn't bother me as much maybe as it does others. What really does bother me, however, is generally speaking, some companies do profit exponentially from it, and I'm not talking about, say, you sell your game privately on eBay to, some other random person. What I am talking about, of course, are the stores that really get an absolute massive turnover from second-hand games, and of course they are actually trembling at the thought of Xbox 720 not doing this. So obviously they may not promote the system as much as the PS4. Regardless, I don't know how much it will really affect it. For me as a PC gamer, I'm used to buying a game on Steam, and you know what? If I don't like that game, and there are some cough Alien Colonial Marines cough, that's just tough shit actually on me. And that's why a lot of the time I buy quite a few games on the Steam sale. This is a complete divergence of what I've been saying, but regardless, just hear me out for a second. One of the reasons that I go quite militant on the Steam sale, and my wallet is left in the corner crying that I've kind of abused it over the last couple of days, is that the games I wasn't really sure about on the regular, when they're like £29 or £30, or £20 or what have you, whatever that is in your current currency. I just figured to myself, it's only, it's 40% off, it's 66% off, whatever it is, I might as well buy it. If it turns out to be 11, I'll be a bit annoyed, but I don't have to have it installed. It's not that bad, it's just another game. However, I know I can't really trade it in. I mean, there are a couple of exceptions here and there, predominantly with small indie titles, but the big releases you can't really do much about. Well, I suppose you can, but it's a bit of a whole thing to do it, and I'm not really going to go into it in this video. My point being that I'm kind of used to it. Regardless, I know many console gamers are going to be upset about it. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, by the way. Please feel free to comment. I understand both perspectives on this. I don't think Microsoft should do it, if I'm honest, because I think it will put people off buying the console. I don't necessarily know how many. I think it really depends on how good the console is in other areas, but it certainly will kill off some people buying the system, and we'll have to see on that. Hopefully as well, they'll make an announcement on the backwards compatibility of the system. Remember that the Xbox 360's CPU is a bit easier to program for than the PS3's. But whether we're going to be seeing emulation on the Xbox 720 for the Xbox 360, I don't really know. Quite honestly, I think it depends on the processing power. There's still not been an exact confirmation. We do know we theorize it's going to be using AMD Jaguar, but the PlayStation 4 version of AMD Jaguar, as far as we understand right now, once again, this is not 100% confirmed. We'll probably know more in the developers conference later on in the year. I believe it's sometime this month or next month. I've got all my dates mixed up, sorry. But regardless, we'll probably know more about what the actual CPU and so on is capable of the PS4. But what we won't know, of course, for a while is what the Xbox 720s can do, and if it's actually capable of emulating the Xbox 360 efficiently anyway. Of course, software emulation is always a bit dicier than hardware emulation. I've mentioned this a couple of times previously, but generally speaking, software emulation can be hit and miss. I mean, look at the Xbox 360's emulation of the original Xbox. You could get some missing textures and so on, and sometimes some games played absolutely perfect, others not so much. So, of course, Sony are likely to be going the cloud-based route, although, of course, that's not 100% known at the moment exactly how they're going to be doing this. Now, earlier on, I did mention about Sony marginalizing, I don't really know if that's the exact word I should use, but certainly not emphasizing the PS4i. It was enough in the conference to make it obvious it was a massive step up from the previous iteration of it from the PS3, but they didn't go on long enough to where hardcore gamers, such as myself, quite honestly, I really don't give a crap about the PS4i. I know some people might get a bit upset about that, but I'll just be honest. Unless, maybe there's might be one or two bits and pieces here that does interest me, but generally speaking, I don't care about those type of control methods. I've been kind of clear on that before in other videos. However, Microsoft have been very, to be honest with you, off point with Kinect and other things, and they've got bashed a few times, particularly with the, XNA, which of course smaller developers, indie developers really rely on, really, to produce games. And even former employees of theirs have kind of criticized them, said, hey, what about the games? Why have you been focusing on all this other crap? And I use quotation marks on crap, when the games themselves are starting to suffer. You need killer first person. So third party games, you need first party games, you need everything you can possibly get, because ultimately you're competing against not only the PlayStation 4 but the Wii U as well. You can't marginalize the Wii U. Most people are writing it off and say, hey, the graphics aren't as good as the PS4 or whatever. You know what? Ultimately speaking, I'm probably going to buy the Wii U for a couple of reasons. One, it has some really nice games on it. Zombie U at the moment is the main one that's really interesting me, but it's not enough for me to buy the console, especially at the price it is at the moment. Regardless, once a couple of other games, for example, the Marios, the Zeldas and so on, start to be released, there's a better chance I'll pick it up. In other words, ultimately, that's still going to be something that Microsoft have to be wary of. Some people may just opt to get the PS4 and Wii U, or some people may decide, hey, PS4 and PC or what have you. They have to still struggle for those sales, ultimately. Of course, we are pretty damn certain there's going to be a hard drive built in, as well as Blu-ray. That all makes sense for various reasons, so I don't really think we have to worry too much about that. I'd like to see some changes to Xbox Live, maybe add in even further functionality. I'm unsure about the kind of sharing system of the PS4. I don't know if Microsoft are going to just implement that randomly. Maybe they could have been working along it, kind of alongside or what have you. To be honest with you, Xbox Live in terms of functionality has been slightly ahead of PSN. Not in all aspects, of course, but in some. So hopefully Microsoft will continue to really support that. There has been some rumors that the Xbox 720 is going to really heavily focus upon media, and if you've listened to previous tech videos, there has been some announcements that the the Xbox 720 has quite a lot of memory allocated towards the operating system, and even some of the CPU cores may be relegated to OS functions. Whether that's actually going to be true or not, of course, we'll probably find out in the conference. There are rumors it's going to be using a Windows 8 base, and if that's so, it's possible that the system will be able to do more. I'm not necessarily saying it'll be able to, do your taxes for you, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could at least access some of the functionality that you may expect on a standard Windows system. Hopefully right now, to sum it up, my initial thoughts are I want them to come out with some decent third-party games. Preferably some demos would be good, playable actual live demos rather than pre-rendered. As long as it makes it clear that the console game will look like that, I won't be so upset. But with pre-rendered stuff, it can always be doctored a little bit. Higher resolution texture there, better lighting there. It can be a little bit hit and miss in my opinion. I don't really like it. I prefer to say, hey, this is the game running in real time. This is what it's going to look like. That's it. Done. I don't mind that. That's fine, even if it's pre-recorded stuff, because they're not 100% confident at the moment with the hardware or what have you. At least show us something that the hardware will be capable of. I'd also like to see the controller, because I think the controller is, to be honest with you, one of the most important aspects of a console. I know that's a bit of an obvious statement, but let's face it, you're going to spend, a couple of hours, 3 hours a day sometimes holding that damn thing, and if it's not comfortable or looks like, it's got barbed wire wrapped around the handles, it's not something you're going to want to hold. In other words, you're going to want to see what it's got on there. I don't necessarily think we're going to be seeing the last of the X, Y, A, B, and so on. I think the standard 8 buttons that Xbox 720 are going to be there. I don't think suddenly we're going to spout another 15 buttons on there, or you're going to have like a MIDI keyboard on there or something. But what I would like to see is an improvement on the D-pad, some extra thought put into the analog placements, the triggers maybe improved a little bit. Just standard stuff. I don't really know what I expect, especially since Sony have already added the touchscreen and so on. Obviously, there's always room for improvement on controllers, but sometimes it can be a little bit hit and miss. Obviously, I'm expecting to see USB 3 and all the other technical jargon as well, but I'm not really going to go into that too much in this video. I'd also like to see a very, very strong first-party lineup from Microsoft, even if they say that some of the titles aren't ready for launch, even if they say, hey, you know what, this could take 3 months after the console's launch, and this will be ready in another 6 months after the console's launch, that doesn't bother me too much, as long as I know that, you know what, we've got some awesome games that are going to be announced and released sequentially, and it's going to keep us fed. Because ultimately, although third-party games that are released on both systems are good, let's ignore which version looks better graphically for a moment, and exclusive piece of DLC and all that. Let's just assume that both games are equal for a second. So Xbox 720 and PS4 versions are the same, but third-party exclusives are very important. So, for example, Metal Gear Solid 4 on the PS3, of course, really helped to sell the PS3, especially in Japan. And, well, to be honest with you, all regions, everyone was really anticipating MGS4. There was some debate whether it was worth the hype. Some people, of course, heavily criticised it with far too many cutscenes. I really liked the game, but that's just my personal take on it, of course. Regardless, those type of things are very important because it shows that, developers are trusting the console and so on to throw in a lot of cash. And it also means that, you can't get that game anywhere else. And especially if it's an already established franchise, it's actually sometimes more important to have an exclusive established third-party franchise, or sorry, third-party franchise game exclusive to your system. For example, let's say EA were to make Mass Effect 4 exclusive to the Xbox and say PC, just for example, and not on the PS4. And of course, I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying it will be before anyone starts raging at me in comments. I know, by the way, that a few people have said, why do you always, reiterate this stuff? Because you'll be surprised at how people can only hear what they want to hear in videos, and then they get really upset at me, and I have to spend a couple of minutes out of my time to re-explain it in comments and so forth. So it's not really worth my time. Regardless, anyway, as I was saying, what I was saying is that assume those type of things in there. People know about the Mass Effect series, and they're probably going to purchase the game and so forth. But first-party games are also extremely important. It shows, of course, that what the game can usually be done, what the system can actually do. Let's face it, as a developer for the first party, you're more likely to be able to produce better quality games at the start, especially because, quite simply put, the hardware better, at least theoretically, not all the time, but generally speaking, those studios would likely have been consulted somewhat during the development of the system, because obviously they have ties to Microsoft and blah 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 blah. So yeah, so when it's all said and done, of course, the actual show, the whole razzmatazz, if you will, of the press conference for both companies is only going to be really the beginning. Then after that, of course, they're going to be trading blows, maybe with subtle references to the other one being inferior, and of course various things to spark fanboy wars and various leaks in massive quotation marks that you honestly shouldn't know, but they want you to know because it adds excitement to the concept. But of course then they don't confirm it and so on, and then of course that leaves me to speculate for you guys for the next couple of months or whatever, until eventually of course they do confirm it, because after all, some of these leaks aren't really leaks as such. They're clever PR stunts, really. They obviously don't want anything confirmed because of various reasons, but it's nice to keep giving people a buzz, a bit of excitement. You get the idea by now. You understand what I'm referring to. In other words, it's something to really kind of bite into, and for the whole industry to really kind of jump on, because, well, let's face it, the tech industry, and to be honest, most industries now are very hype based, and if people are talking about you, then that's a good thing. And to be honest with you, even if you're not an Xbox fan, even if you hate Xbox for whatever reason, let's say an Xbox dropped on your toe when you were younger and it broke it or something, and with the weight of the old Xboxes, you could have a point there. Regardless, let's say that did happen, for some reason the Xbox, every single time you see an Xbox you absolutely foam at the mouth with hatred, you're probably still going to want to see it, to be honest, because you're going to be curious, and there's always a possibility that if the conference is impressive enough, that will push you over to the the Xbox side, the dark side, if you prefer. So yeah, hopefully with all of the questions that we have are going to be answered. I don't think we're going to have all of them. I am really hoping for technical demonstration. I'm really hoping that Microsoft have bumped up the amount of cores on the graphics card, the GCN cores, from the reported amount. I'm hoping it's at least a couple more, or preferably it will match the PS4. That would be absolutely fantastic. Whether it will or not, who knows? It's possible they have done that. After all, Sony managed to sneak an extra 4 gigs of RAM in their console that no one really expected. So who knows what Microsoft really have done. After all, a lot of these rumours, they could be 6 months, 12 months, old, and someone somehow managed to, get it out via, I don't know, a hidden compartment in a sneaker. Of course, I'm obviously kidding, but you get the general idea, and then somehow that gets leaked, and people assume it's the latest because, after all, it's the latest thing that got leaked. It just doesn't necessarily mean it's the latest in terms of the actual design of the console right then and there. And yes, I did remember to breathe at some point there. Regardless, I think that just about covers it for now. I have an absolutely massive plethora of videos to go through today. A couple of people have done some announcements. I can only apologise if you guys can hear any noise in the background. It appears that every single thing ever is trying to interrupt me while recording today, including construction work outside. Regardless, I think that just about covers this particular video, and I would hope that you will stick with RGT, because we're going to be covering everything, of course, and next generation stuff is going to be a major priority. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be focused only upon it. Of course, we are going to be focused upon the PC and everything else that you can expect from us. So, with all that said, I'm going to get going. Take care of yourselves, and have an absolutely fantastic day or evening or whatever for you.